Hello, and welcome back to We're Not So Different, a podcast about how we've always been idiots. My name is Luke Waters, and I'm an amateurish historian, and as always, I'm joined by Dr. Eleanor Yanniga, who is anything but. Today, we are doing a mailbag show. So yeah, let's just get right into it. We're doing a mailbag because we've had so many great interviews recently that we've had to skip our normal patron question a few times. Which we normally do at the beginning of each episode. So we're going to answer a few, have some laughs, maybe learn something, and then call it a day. You might be saying to yourself, not another mailbag episode. To which I say, buddy, you got a lot of fucking nerve.
Yeah, wow.
But also,
wow.
Yeah, wow. How dare you? But also, look, we're starting a new series next time about various strange and highly interesting events from the Middle Ages that we're calling Weird Medieval. We're going to talk about the time Justinian sent 2 spies disguised as monks into China to steal the secrets of silk, and that time Mansa Musa cratered the gold market, and yes, finally, the Erfurt latrine disaster. And
stop asking, we're doing it.
You will learn why you can do exactly 15 minutes on the Erfurt latrine disaster because, it's very funny, but, there's not a lot to it. Bad, shoddy craftsmanship and falling into some shit. And then you laugh and, and there you go. You can only do that for about 15 minutes.
True.
Yeah. There will be much more, of course, because the Middle Ages was, quite frankly, very weird. And we want to celebrate that. But with that in mind for next time, let's answer some questions. Starting with... our patron White. Oh, and by the way, if you want to ask us questions like these that occasionally get cobbled into mailbag episodes or are usually right at the beginning of every episode, then please subscribe to the Patreon. Patreon.com/WNSDpod. Check it out. We got a bunch of bonus episodes on there. We're going through Andor right now. We're voting to decide on the next book club topic we're going to do, which I think this episode will post before it's over. The poll is over on February 28th. So check all that out. And we will, we have a lot of fun there. And you should subscribe. It's just $5. You know the deal. I'll quit talking about this if you actually do subscribe. You specifically. Yes, I'm talking to you. Anyway, so our first one comes from our patron White Trash Historian, who says, so listening to the Fail Sons episode got me thinking, for a lot of different folk heroes, we have stories of their untimely demise, whether it's from heroism, martyrdom, or betrayal, but do we have a final demise for Robin Hood?
Yeah, we do. Quick answer, and it is as a result of betrayal and martyrdom. So basically, I know it's fucked up, right? And almost all of the legends have the same outcome here, which is that he gets older, he's living a good life with his merry men, et cetera, and he gets ill. And so he goes to get medical help from his aunt, who is a prioress, over in Kirklees Priory, which is near Huddersfield today. But a bad guy, Sir Roger de Doncaster, goes and starts talking to the prioress and is like, you should murder your nephew, actually. And she's like, oh, word, you make some good points. And so under the guise of helping him and bleeding him for the purposes of health reasons, she bleeds him and exsanguinates him too much. He realizes that he's dying, and he blows his horn to call Little John to come help him. And Little John, realizing he's too late, carries Robin to the window, and Robin is able to set one more arrow out. And Robin says, bury me where the arrow lands, which he does.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And so that is how we get the now grave, quote unquote, of Robin Hood, which is in Kirklees Park.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and which is cool. That's in Derbyshire. Shout out Derbyshire. And we also have Little John's grave, which is in Hathersage, which is a dope town in Derbyshire. And yeah, so there you go.
That's awesome that Little John got his own grave. You don't usually get one for the sidekick.
Yeah, one for the homies. One for the homies, basically. So yeah.
I've said it before. I think it's hilarious to me that there are like graves for fictional characters. Like there are old graves for fictional characters like Robin Hood and Tom Thumb, and so that's hilarious.
I love that
to me.
shit. Yeah.
Also, it's very funny that Robin Hood died like George Washington. They just let way too much blood out. They were like, "Get dry, you fuck." Anyway, yeah. Sorry for people who don't know. Basically, when George Washington he got sick, I think it was pneumonia or something, and the doctor and the agreed upon medical science at the time was like, you just got to drain him of blood. Like you drain. So I think they drained him. I think it was 5 pints of blood, like a desiccated husk at the end. And they were just like, "Yep, couldn't save the president. No idea why. Some things science can't answer." I guess.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. That's terrible. Yeah. Anyway, thanks. Yeah. White trash historian. Thank you for the question. Perhaps next time I won't end it with such a weird aside. Ollie, the next comes from Ollie Kant, who says, "Okay, time to settle this once and for all. What's the real number of the beast as reported in Scripture? I kind of hope it isn't 616, so I can annoy all the people who told me it was."
Do you know what the thing is? You get more sources which say that it's 666, which I'll say. Now, having said that, we've got a fragment of papyrus, which is papyrus fragment 115, which is of the book of Revelation. And it says it's 616. And it's like very, very old, basically, is the thing, which is how you kind of get that, that being the real one. But you know what? I think that what you kind of have to do to a certain extent with biblical exegesis is you've got to go with consensus to a certain extent. And like certain versions of the Greek Bible, for example, will just like say straight up 666, right? Like they will say it out, which is like let's see if I can do my Greek. Hexakosoi hexaconta hex. Cleo, I'm sorry for butchering your language if you're listening. So like
wow.
they will kind of like say that fully, but we do have like this kind of like the Arrhenius branch that says 616. But I mean, I've heard other things as well. I've seen the mark of the beast being the head of Caesar. Like that's the thing that I've certainly come across. You know. It just kind of like really depends on which translations you're using. Like, you know, what does it mean? But I think that consensus is 666. So it's like, meh.
All that, you know, and all that's well and good if you're a historian or I guess maybe a Catholic. But look, if you're Protestant, it's 666. That's it.
Yeah.
We don't play with the 616 shit. You know, like 616 to Protestants is, you know, that's the Marvel continuity. Earth 61. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's
a bad
like,
joke.
but I mean, like we have illuminated manuscripts that have like 666 getting put on people's forehead and things like that, from the medieval period. So, you know, I'm just kind of going with what my homies were going with, and they're saying 666. So, you know, like, yes. But also, I guess what I would also say is shut up, nerd out. It's not real. So,
yeah.
You know.
I mean, yeah, it's not, it doesn't mean anything that, no, like it does mean something. I think most people kind of agree. It's like a reference to like Nero or the emperor
exactly.
at the time when this was written, which I think would have been Nero. Like, you know, it like a lot of the, like, you know, Revelation is cool because it has all these cool stories, but at the same time, like he's kind of mostly talking about like stuff that is happening, like stuff that's happening in the Roman Empire at the time, you know, and he's just, you know, using very flowery, you know, apocalyptic language for it, which is cool. And I appreciate that because Revelation is a cool book. But you know, like if you get too far into, you know, biblical numerology. You'll drive yourself insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's like 10, not 10, there's a million different meanings for everything. And, you just, is it one thing or the other? Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that way lies madness, and I think that to a certain extent, like I'm going to go with the historian's answer, which is that what is the quote unquote truth is not as important as how people are relating to something. And so if more people say it's 666, it becomes 666.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the nature of language. It's like trying to, fight with the word medieval, because medieval, it has a technical meaning. It has a quasi-technical meaning that people understand it, but it also has like a, it also just has a broad, colloquial meaning that's like barbaric or something, and
absolutely.
I mean, like you can't, like that sucks, but you can't, you can't really, you can't do much about it other than, just try to, use different terminology, because, colloquialisms are what they are. Anyway, yeah, Ollie Kant, thank you so much for the question. Next up, we got one from Arcturus, who says, I was wondering about the Comtat Venison,
I think.
Venison. What exactly was its status with regards to the empire and France? Did it produce particular tensions between them and the papacy? What impact did being a papal enclave for over 500 years have on the territory and cultural identity of its habits?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so...
inhabitants, sorry.
Go
ahead.
For those not in the know, this is the name for the area of land around Avignon. So it's like the papal land in what is now the south of France. Did it produce tensions between, France and the empire and the papacy? Yeah. But, for the empire, their thing was, hey, come back here. Hey, you go your ass back to Rome. Hey. That was the
hey, guys. Hey, can you change it?
Don't keep hanging out there. Now, as a general rule of thumb, the French were into this shit. The French were like, that's fucking right. Yeah, you see how better, so the papacy is here now. Kind of thing. So, like, that was certainly there. Now, you can see that there are some kind of tensions, though. So if you ever go down to Avignon, which I would recommend doing, if you go across the river to Villeneuve, Avignon, one or the other. I forget if the lay is in there. But if you go across the river into the French king's territory, there's a big fuck off castle on the other side, where they're like, just so you knows.
Just so you know you're not whose pleasure you're here at.
Yeah, you are not. You are no longer in papal territory. And, they're doing a traditional castle off. The papal palace in Avignon is absolutely fucking enormous. And so they've got like this big one over in Villeneuve that is just kind of like showing you what the fuck is up, right? So you have this kind of like border thing. But as a general rule of thumb, the French kind of see Avignon as meaning that the papacy is more in their sphere of control. And indeed, it generally does reflect that being the case. So it does heighten tensions with the Holy Roman Empire, because the Holy Roman Empire spends all its time being like, could you please come back? I actually think it's holier to be in Rome. Now, it does have a particular influence on people within the territory. Yeah, like they see themselves as kind of like papal subjects. And that kind of like makes them feel very fancy indeed. But, you also got to understand at the time, like everyone sees themselves as like hyper local in ways that we don't now. So, like, sure, you're kind of under the auspices of the King of France, but no one would be like, yes, I'm French. Right. They'd be like, oh, I'm Occitan, or, like whatever the fuck down there. And I mean, actually, like Parisians might say they're French, something like that. But they, like the nationality thing is much more limited, and it's not as strong as kind of like the kind of like local affiliations and local authorities. Now, does it have? It's got a cool cultural export that any fan of the Beastie Boys will recognize these days, which is the a nice bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape. How about that?
I was wondering where I was.
Come on.
Was like, where are we going?
Shout out Beastie Boys. Shout out the important song "Body Rockin'." All right, like a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape. I'm fine like wine when I'm start to rap. No,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so Chateauneuf is a town just like one over from Avignon, and like the du Pape, means that like they're within papal control. So there is a kind of understanding of themselves as being this particular region, and that they have their own kind of thing going on. They also, very interestingly, have a very strong Jewish tradition there. So they have a really old synagogue, the Carpentras Synagogue, which was built in the 14th century. So like while it's under papal control. And it was like very much considered to be like a haven for Jewish people. So that's cool. Now, tensions with the French crown tend to hype up a bit in the early modern period. So in the 17th century, you have like really intense fighting between the crown and the church over the area. So like, for example, Louis XIV was like, absolutely get fucked. Unsurprising. Mr. L'État c'est moi was like, I'm afraid that I own all of this, right? They keep control, the papacy does, until 1791. So, and then basically it gets taken back over and kind of re-administered in with Toulouse, I believe, which is where it had started out in the first place. So there are certainly tensions, but less in the medieval period, more in the modern period, when it's kind of about how kings have figured out how to make more money off taxation. And so they're like, I don't want the church getting that. That is for me. Yeah. But yeah, they're cool. I like it down there. So yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yep. We love, that's another weird thing. Just, yeah, not only like it stay, why would it stay its own little region after the papacy moved? It's fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. The thing is they do think of themselves as being cool and having, they've got a cool specific tradition. And, I think that for them, they kind of see it as being like, well, if we're administrated by the papacy, you kind of get to go to the papacy more readily for certain things. So it's like you might have the ear of them.
Right.
More readily, which is, cool if you're Catholic, which they are. And also, it means that, you can tell the King of France to fuck off when he wants things.
True.
It's not like the church isn't going to levy taxes on you, but, it's just different, right?
Yeah.
So you might feel like you have a little bit more representation, basically.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. Arcturus, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Next, we have one from Band User. How would you try to recommend your favorite media to a medieval peasant?
God, what is my fucking favorite media?
You just gotta pick one.
Okay, do you know what? You know what? I am gonna recommend, the graphic novel to a medieval peasant. And bitch, it's not gonna be hard. I will say that, because what I can say is like, if you can learn to read, and then I'd be like, and you can, because it's vernacular. Then, and even if you can't, the pictures tell the story, right? And they're really good at reading pictures. Right. So they would be better able to kind of like follow along. They'd be like really willing to come on a journey with me about graphic novels. Right. Because that's what a lot of the art that they interact with is anyway. When you see saints' life depictions where it'll be like there's in different parts of the painting, it will show like different scenes from their life. That's kind of like a graphic novel. So I'd be like, yeah, and it's about things other than saints' lives.
Like, wait, what?
Wait,
there's
what?
stuff beside that. What? No?
What? Yeah.
You can have a story about just other things? No.
Yeah, like, I don't know.
No.
Start them on a fucking Robin Hood comic,
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And just see where we go. Start like I could ease him in by getting some kind of like medieval themes, and then we could go from there. There's got to be like a fucking Sir Gawain. Comic out there.
There's a graphic novel for everything. Yeah. So when I read the question, I was thinking it was more like your favorite show or movie or something like that.
Oh yeah.
For you, or for your version, I would guess I would just be like, just set up the TV and just be like, or no, just set up like a big movie theater, like somewhere, like a big like movie screening somewhere in town, and be like, just watch it. Just watch.
They're gonna run.
Do is sit there.
They're gonna run.
Oh yeah. But they'll come back. We'll play it on a loop.
Yeah.
We'll protect it so they can't hit it when the train comes at the screen or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, look,
maybe like you just start them off like peeking around the corner, like just look through the door, and then when they notice that the train's not coming at them or whatever.
Yeah, they're like, what new devilry is this? And then we can explain, Look, it's just magic, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, so there are some tubes and wires in the back of this electronic thing, no, you know what? It's fine. It's just magic.
It's just magic. It's fine. It may as well
God
be.
did it. Yeah, just be like, God did it.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. We're good to go. Yeah. As for like my favorite media, look, man, just, hey, you think sword fights are cool? What if the swords were glowing?
Pew pew.
And they did kind of flips, and people went pew 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 pew, pew, and there were cool sound effects. Look, there are knights in it. They're like, whoa, sold.
Yeah.
And then they get really mad when none of the knights ride horses. Like, what the fuck?
You would be pissed about the lack of horses, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Distinct lack of space horses throughout most of the series. Yep. Band user, thank you for the interesting spin on that question.
That's a really good one.
It reminds me of that tweet. It's like, me. So what do you think, medieval peasant? The Dorito is pretty good. And the tweet, me and the tweet and the medieval peasant. Yeah, I understand it. I understood it just fine. It's just like, whatever. I don't give a shit about it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Next, we got one from Archibald Absalon's Ample Ass. Says, this is a sort of a companion thought to a thing I'd like to hear Eleanor's opinion about, which I have strong opinions on, which I won't bug her with, which is, how valuable is experimental archaeology to the field, and what are some pitfalls that you've seen in its application, I guess, in the study of history generally?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Now, like, there are certain things that it can be quite useful for. And, we need to be kind of like, careful about these things. But, for example, one really interesting bit of experiential/experimental archaeology that I've seen happen recently was up at Gefren, which is a new museum that's kind of opened up in Northumberland. And they have made kind of part of a recreation of a pre-Norman King's Hall. Okay, very cool. Like early medieval thing. And one of the things that they did for part of it was they had people using traditional materials to make kind of like all the banners for it and everything. So they were using the traditional, very bendy needles, like using like hand spinning all and hand dyeing all of the wool, all of these things. And one of the things that enabled them to do was just tell you how fucking long it takes, like how many hours of work does it take to make a cloth like this, which is really valuable to us because it helps to explain, textile wealth or the wealth of varying places. It also had a really good outcome in terms of, if you see medieval needles, they're really long and super bendy. And one of the things that they kind of figured out through doing this is that the benefit is as you use it, it kind of molds to your finger and you get faster with it as a result. So because it is specifically molded to your finger, you can just be like beep, 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 and it goes in and out, as opposed to like our needles, which are perfectly straight and kind of like a one size fits all thing. So you have these kind of like personal needles that kind of go to your hand. Now that is very, very cool. And I do think that, like, when I've participated in things where I have, like, done XYZ, it's given me a good understanding of, like just what it means to kind of do everyday life stuff, right? And I think that is really good. So, like, trying your hand at blacksmithing is just good so you can understand it. Like, I basically, like, I don't know, fucking try plowing, bitch. Like, now the pitfalls of it is that it's like, well, material selection, that's like a really big one, right? Where it's like, are you wearing the correct clothing? Like, are you, okay, so, well, that's how that particular needle worked. Is that going to be all of them? Right? Sometimes, like, it also takes a really fucking long time, just to kind of do these things where so it's just like the amount of time that you need to kind of put into something in order to figure it out can be kind of huge, as opposed to just kind of like making educated guesses based on what things are. So, like, the thing that I think is really good about it is that kind of connection that you get. It's a very practical way of understanding the past, right? But fundamentally, you're never going to be able to have, like, repeatable examples of things. Like, so it's like, if you're building a house, you can never rebuild a house in exactly the same circumstances again and again and again. Like, it always changes, right? So, there is always going to be this kind of problem with trying to apply the scientific method to temporal differences, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, things have changed. The weather, the climate. Just things change on the planet over time. I think it's probably one of those things where, like, for proving certain things are possible, like if you suggest a theory to prove certain things are possible, I think that's cool because I've read these stories of people like reconstructing like boats from like the Neolithic era and before, like the pre-Neolithic, like tens of thousands of years ago, to see like how far these people could theoretically actually travel. Like, could it make it across this jetty? Could it make it across a mile of water, et cetera, and stuff like that. Is I think is really cool and interesting because, like, as long as you can. If you have a surviving example of like a boat or something like that that these people had, you can kind of recreate that and then, at least test the limits of it. But, as you said, there's a lot of issues with what you're actually, you have to get it very specific and you have to have a whole lot of information about the thing that you're talking about, like, the boat or the weapon or whatever, before it actually works. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I think it is like cool to do, and I really dig it. But I feel like the thing to keep in mind is that it's probably a tool in your toolbox as opposed to like the one thing that you need to be doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. Archibald Absalon's Ample Ass, thank you for the question. Next we have one from Kristen who says, hello, apologies if you talked about this already and I missed it, but having just gone back to your Silk Road episode, I'm very curious about law and order and banditry on the routes. Was there a lot of theft? Was there any kind of overarching authority to punish thieves? Were there taxes and tolls that had to be paid along the way? And how many times would ownership of stuff lawfully change hands along the way, as in being sold along to middlemen for a small profit, and so on and so on? Thanks.
So this is good several questions, and the answer is this is all highly dependent, right?
Yeah.
But I would say, like, for in terms of stretches you've got to do, you are a little bit more safe from banditry if you're on like the overland route than elsewhere, because you're gonna say that in front of Genghis Khan. You're gonna tell Temujin that you stole this.
Yeah.
No, you're fucking not. So it's like there's some fucking law and order going down, like at particular points in time, right? Where this is very much seen as the bread and butter of many of the Khanates. This is where they get their money, is through taxation here, and they do not fucking want bandits around. And you do not want to piss these guys off. Is that to say that people don't give it a go? Yeah, they absolutely do. But it is probably watched more closely, and there are stiffer penalties than in a lot of places. You're more likely to get in trouble with one of the Khanates than you are with like the King of England, right? Because they've got their shit more together. And then following, for example, the Pax Mongolica, where all the Khanates kind of like agree to calm their shit down. You do see that banditry, because like banditry might like happen as a result of the various Khanates not getting along. So they'll be like, well, I just wandered over here. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? But still, it's not that bad. On the sea route, there are pirates. Certainly there are, especially around the Straits of Malacca. This is always an issue. And it's still an issue because the Straits of Malacca is an excellent place to do some fucking pirating. So like that is definitely there, but it's not like any more dangerous than anywhere else. It just kind of comes with the territory. If you are moving things along a coastal route and there's a lot of money involved, there's going to be some theft. There is overarching authority to punish thieves, but like again, this is going to come with like, well, who's controlling this bit of road? And as a general rule of thumb, it's one thing to have bandits from like another Khanate doing it or something like that, because that can like precipitate a war, and you can do that. But generalized thieves, they will probably kill your ass, because again, this is where taxes are coming from. So they do not want you out here doing that. They want people to understand that this is a safe place to move goods. And that is very, very important to everyone concerned. So yeah, there are, so for example, there are people patrolling. That's something that exists. Yeah, there are taxes and tolls that are paid along the way. You think you're not just getting into Samarkand, like it's like, oh, hello, welcome to Samarkand. Come out your fucking pockets, right? So you are going to have to pay taxes and tolls. And indeed, this is one of the ways that you justify the prices of moving things. So it's like part of what makes these things luxury goods is you have to pay these taxes and tolls along the way, and so that has to be compensated for. And indeed, that's also like one of the ways that people going into debt in order to do this is kind of justified, because it's like, well, here are all these fees. Like, this is why I can charge you X amount is as a result of all the tolls that you'll need to pay. So basically, you're going to have to pay taxes anytime you enter a city, anytime you change, if you get into someone else's territory, they're going to tax you again. That just anytime you come into port, if you're on a boat, there will be taxes and tolls that you have to pay. I cannot tell you how many times things would change along the way, because some people will do it on their own. They will own a boat and they will move it along, and that is what they're fucking doing, right? Some people are going to be smaller time dealers, and they only go from here to here, and they sell on to established middlemen. Some middlemen will never leave Samarkand, right? And they just are the ones who kind of broker things that go in between. So it really depends. There is no real kind of way of knowing in particular, because it just it depends on who the merchant is, what the goods are, and there are so many varying plays that partially here. To a certain extent, if you can do it and you're willing to put up with how long the journey is, there's a lot of money to be made by keeping these goods in your possession. But it is such a long journey that a lot of people won't do it. Whereas it's more likely, I would say, that things aren't going to change hands if you own a boat. That's going to go more direct. But that's just because it's easier and faster, right? Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of moving parts is the answer.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for the question. Next up, we have one for Horatio Hex, from Horatio Hex, who says, I have a question about how the court of the Holy Roman Empire dealt with administrative documents, since the court was traveling all over the empire. while all local institutions, monasteries, villages, cities, principalities, and kingdoms of various sizes probably have places to hold records and important papers, I wonder how a court always on the move handled all the paperwork to keep the HRE functioning. This is an interesting question. I've never really thought about this.
So this is a great question. And the answer is interestingly, a lot of times they just fucking carry them with them. Like they're like homeboys are just like have all of their papers, and it's not always a problem until you get like a very particularly peripatetic ruler. So this is a problem for people within Charles IV's court because homeboy is moving around. But one of the things that happens is that they kind of have they will bring in storage after a couple of years where they'll be like, well, I don't necessarily need to look at this all the time, so I will send this back to Prague now. And then that'll go to kind of like the preferred castle. And what ends up happening is you get lots of varying repositories of information from various rulers, but you tend to know where to go look depending on who it is. So if it's if you want some documents from Charles IV, you're going to look at Prague, and you might look at Nuremberg, where there are a lot of his things as well. So, but you do kind of have to have them move with you. But also a lot of what the documents are, they're often being sent out. So oftentimes, like if you have it's less that the government itself is keeping record. It's more that the government is giving a record to the person in question. So then they are going to have the document in their files at whatever castle you've sent it to. So a lot of the time with that, it's kind of like the responsibility of whoever these things are being sent to. That's who you're more likely to have documents from other people that like are at the court and that kind of like stack up. And this isn't to say that the court doesn't have copies of its own documents. It absolutely does. But also documents get lost all the time for all sorts of reason, burning down being like one of the main reasons that you lose them. So in this case, memory does count as something. But you might often just have like multiple documents of things. If it's something that's really, really important, you'll keep a copy with you. You'll make another document, and then the emperor in question will have a place that is their major repository. It'll usually be in their Hausmacht, so kind of like the lands that they come from themselves, because there isn't necessarily like any one imperial Roman city that is like the head of the empire. It changes all the time depending on who's in charge. So it's more kind of like dependent on family is the answer, and less on like the idea of like an imperium where we need to keep all imperial documents kind of going.
Right. Did they like, I mean, obviously I'm sure documents were purged by emperors or whoever that didn't want people to see them, but was there like a regular purge process, or were they just like carrying documents around that some papal bull from 500 years ago that they still got shoved somewhere?
So like the papal bull from 500 years ago, that'll be precious, right? That is going to kind of like be somewhere that is stashed and that everybody knows about it. And really important documents like that will be kind of shifted from emperor to emperor, and they will know it. But like also the papacy is going to have a copy of that one, so that they will know. There are kind of like purging processes that will just kind of happen. If again you have a peripatetic court, eventually, if it's just kind of like something really run of the mill, like you will slough it off after a few years, like in a generalized kind of process. There isn't anything necessarily written down that it's like, and then after 3 years we'll get rid of this, but it just will happen.
Yeah. Cool.
But a lot of imperial documents stick around for a really long time. The biggest way that we lose a lot of them is in I think it's the 18th century. There's a consolidation of the monastic libraries underneath one of the Habsburgs. These fucking guys. They just decided they're going to like bring everything into one place. And then you can kind of like go and have a look-see at it. But as a result of it, they're like, oh, we already have a copy of that. Read it, and then they just like destroy a bunch of documents because they're like, who needs that? Who cares? Right. But it's interesting where documents will show up. So, you'll find them in like repositories in smaller towns. You get a lot of cathedral documents. You get a lot of like municipal archives that will keep things, and stuff shows up as a result of that. But it just really depends. And I mean, that's kind of true of a lot of places, though. I mean, not everyone is like a massive bureaucrat, and so you don't always get great records. But as a general rule of thumb, it's like check with the family. Like where do you know the family archives generally are, and that's helpful.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Horatio, thank you.
Really
so
good
much
question.
For the question.
Very
yeah.
astute.
Thank you. Yes. Next we have one from Gafsi, who says, was medicine in the medieval Islamic world more advanced than in the Christian world? My understanding is that it was more advanced in that it applied the principles of Galenic medicine more faithfully, but given that those principles were wrong, was the quality of care actually any better?
So like you kind of hit the nail on the head here, Gaussy, with what the problem is. And it's really funny because you watch people do this all the time. I'm really fascinated by the desire to... So how do I put this? So there's a kind of desire when everyone is all like, boo, white people, which, quite right too. Like you are correct.
Yes.
That is accurate. Where the people also want to go, and the Islamic world was so much more advanced than Europe at the time. And I'm like, their medicine also did not work in the majority of cases, right? So there are certain things that they were definitely more advanced on. So, for example, surgical methods. And very famously, eye surgery was something that they were quite good at. And so things that are not Galenic usually work better, because it doesn't matter if you're being more faithful to Galenic medicine. It doesn't work. It's not fucking real, right? And they are super, super faithful to it. And that's a bad thing, right? Like that's not a good thing. However, because the things that they are more advanced at, like eye surgery, Europe all the time is going, fuck yeah, give me that, I want that, like I'm going to take it. And they are constantly asking for Arabic medical documents. They're constantly being translated out of Arabic into Latin, especially on the Iberian Peninsula. And there's a constant flow of information into Europe. There isn't like a big door that is like, no, we're definitely not taking this on board. Everyone fucking knows what's going on over there, and they're trying to get it. Right? And to the point where certainly these things then do come into circulation within Europe. So it's not like, it isn't like there's no Iron Curtain in the Middle Ages. And people would like go over to the Middle East to train, right? And then come back. Like that's a thing. That definitely happens.
Yeah.
People at Salerno, like the big medical school, they will go over to the Middle East and come back. There's a lot of exchange back and forth with the Middle East and with like Northern Africa. That is, it's an incredibly porous world. The Mediterranean is still a place where people are just kind of like moving around all the time. So it's more our idea that these places are massively removed from each other, and less that it is a kind of medieval function, right? So they definitely do figure out these things first, but it doesn't stay there. And it's not like medieval Europeans are like, and I don't want that barbaric medicine, like I'm better than them, I love to roll in filth or something like that. That isn't real. They know who's ahead of the game, and they're trying to get it.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it makes total sense. I don't want any medicine from the Middle Ages.
No.
You know?
No.
Great people. They were trying their best with limited knowledge, like not having the ton of technology, and the stuff that they did get right, incredible, amazing. Like the fact that you got that right is literally astounding, given like the limited technology. But I don't want any of that shit at all. I don't care if it's from China. I don't care if it's from Europe. I don't care if it's from Mesoamerica. I don't care. I don't want any of it. You guys are great. I respect you. We respect the intelligence and diligence of medieval people here, but I don't want any of their medicine. You keep that shit away from me. If you start talking about my black bile, we're gonna fight. I don't care.
Yeah. I just don't think that you need to want any of it, right? Like, I mean, because it's like, I'm like, oh yeah, they're really good at eye surgery, bitch. Do not come near my goddamn eye without anesthesia. No. I will die. Thanks. Guess I'll go blind, right? Guess I've got
the idea.
I got a cataract now. That's what's up.
The idea of feeling someone like cut on your eye. Oh God.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like,
no, thank you. Gassy, thank you so much for the question. Next up, we have one from, I believe, Madeline, who says, hello, not sure if this is the appropriate place for this. I've really been enjoying Beatrice's last smile since Eleanor mentioned it on the podcast. Woo! Would you, Eleanor, consider posting a list of books that you've enjoyed recently or are on your radar, especially for the more academically oriented history genre? It can be really hard to tell apart well-researched and insightful work from the heap of books that get published each year. I'm currently eyeing Peter H. Wilson's The 30 Years' War, Anthony Caldelas's The New Roman Empire, and Bart Van Loo's The Burgundians. Do these hold up at a glance?
Okay, so in the first place, shout out Beatrice Last Smile. I did do a little list actually for, I think, what is it called? Shepherd.com, where I was like, here's some books that I think are really good, which you can go look at. But two of them are actual medieval books, which is the Canterbury Tales and the Inferno. And, you're already a fucking patron, so we've been through. We've been through the Inferno, right? But another one that I really like to shout out, it's not new, but if you are down to do some academic reading, Other Middle Ages by Michael Goodrich is one of my faves. It is really excellent in terms of looking at like Jewish people, sex workers, gay people like that in the Middle Ages that are often quite overlooked. And I think that is a really excellent one. Another academically minded book that I think you should check out if you want to know more about kind of like ideas about women's bodies. I really like Catherine Park's The Secrets of Women, which is really, really excellent and very well researched. Now, I've heard nothing but good things about the Burgundians. I think that also it is a really cool thing to read because the Burgundians are so important and we do kind of ignore them all the time. So I would say all systems go on that. I've not read it myself, but I understand it to be good, is what I would say. I also hear good things about Wilson's 30 Years' War. Again, I've not read it myself, but I think that like what I've kind of heard about it is that like some people think it's a nice slant on the 30 Years' War. What have I fucking read lately? Too much. I've got a really good book that I'm reading right now. Let's see if she can get the PDF up. I get shit before it comes out. So one that is really good that is coming out that I really recommend is called A Desire, A History of European Sexuality. It's by Anne Clark. This is the second edition. And it's really cool because it's got, it goes like through, it goes basically from the archaic period up through the modern period. So I've really been enjoying that, and I think you could check that out. What the fuck else have I read lately? I recently read a biography of Thomas Müntzer that I really liked, out on Verso, which is really excellent. And so if you want to learn more about, the Peasants' War, which we talked about last week with week before with November, that is a really good one, and that's out on Verso, and it's just fun. It's like really, really nicely written, but very academic as well. Another one that I really recommend to a lot of audiences, this is in the list that I did for Shepherd, so I'm just giving the whole list away. I really like The Light Ages by Seb Falk, which is about medieval science. I recommend that one a lot. I get that one for haters at Christmas very often. And I highly recommend that one. So there's a lot of good stuff out there. The thing to do, I would usually say, if you're interested in a history book, is go look at the biography of the author. Not to be a hater or whatever, but are they trained? Yeah. Or is this just some guy? Because, some guy histories can be really entertaining and fun, but you need to kind of be careful with the scholarship.
Yeah.
at times is what I would say. So yeah, I hope. But I'm constantly fucking reading new books. They're just showing up to my house all the goddamn time, which is really nice. And like I'm not complaining about it, although my bookshelves are. But you know, some of them I think are like, you know, totally fine, and you know, I read so much that it just kind of takes something to really grab me to get me excited, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Madeline, thank you so much for the question. And lastly, we have one here from Benjamin Sisko, and it is a counterfactual, which we love.
Yes.
Maybe this is a common counterfactual, but how would it change the Reformation in England if Pope Clement just granted Henry VIII his divorce? And how much of a possibility was that? Kind of seems like there was precedent and enough of an argument to just do it for the sake of keeping the Catholic Church in England.
Yeah, so this is funny because I was just I went over to Sister Podcast 10K posts before I did this, and we were talking about Thomas More. And so here's my theory on this: is the trouble with there is precedent to grant this divorce to Henry VIII. And Henry VIII runs into many obstacles. The first is that Catherine of Aragon doesn't fucking want it.
Yep.
Right? It's really common for divorces to be granted to royal people if both people are like, yeah, get me the fuck out of here. Right? Even when the Pope is like, are you sure? Are you sure you can't work it out? Eventually, like, he will often relent and just give them what they want. But Catherine of Aragon doesn't fucking want it, so you're already in a difficult place. The second issue, legalistically, is that Henry VIII had asked for a dispensation to marry her. And, you know, he's trying to divorce her on the grounds of, it's called incest. But it's like basically since she was married to his brother. You know, he's like, well, yeah, and so that's incest. So, and he's like, yeah, but you specifically came to me and said, will you please ignore all the incest? Because I want to marry this girl. And now you don't want to do it anymore. And so you're like, hey, actually, could you say that the incest is fine? So like that is a difficult legal point. It's very difficult to walk that back when you specifically were like, no, this is fine. Right?
Yeah.
That puts the Pope in a really sticky position. The third issue is that the Pope was sorta, kinda, a little kidnapped by the Habsburgs. little bit under the control of the Habsburgs, who were like, you're not fucking letting my auntie get a divorce. Right?
Yeah.
You got Habsburgs all over the fucking place in Rome, and they're like, I think you'll find that this divorce is not getting fucking granted. Right? And also, you know, I don't think the papacy thought he would go Protestant, right? Because he was surrounded by very Catholic guys at the time, you know, like whether that be Wolsey or, you know, Thomas More after Wolsey steps down as Chamberlain. You know, there are Catholic guys in the house. There's Catholic thinking going on. And so, you know, I just don't think that they thought that this guy who's like a bit of a, you know, jock, like he's a bit of a fucking... You know, he likes to play tennis and ride fucking horses, and they don't think he's going to go full Reformation, because the Reformation's nerd shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like you got to sit down and really like be thinking about this all the time, and it's nerd shit, and you know, he's not necessarily going to do that. And so I don't think that they really thought that he would go Protestant, right? But what it comes down to is if it's between not granting the divorce and keeping the fucking Habsburgs happy, or granting the divorce and making England happy, guess who they're going to side with every fucking time? Like England,
the Habsburgs.
Like England does not fucking matter when like in comparison to the Habsburgs, it just doesn't. Like, if it's between keeping the Holy fucking Roman Emperor happy, keeping Spain happy. No, they don't give a fuck. They don't care. Like, where's all the money coming from? It's not fucking coming from England. So, like, you know, fundamentally, you're going to, like, just follow where the money is. Do I think that he would have stayed Catholic if the divorce was granted? For longer, yes.
Yeah.
I think that there's an argument to me that he at least would have stayed Catholic longer. I think that by the time he got tired of Anne Boleyn, things would get tricky again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, but I also want to say that I do think that part of what happens is that, you know, there are these advantages for Henry VIII, which is that he wants this divorce. He also wants the money that will come from dissolving the monasteries. But I do believe that because he sits down and thinks about it, I do think he does have some heartfelt Protestant-ass beliefs. However, a lot of people who stay Catholic do. And I think that one of the things that kind of gets him to sit down and think about this is that he's not getting what he wants because he's a spoiled fucking child. So he develops this philosophy, which he then subsequently comes to really believe in as a result of not getting what he wants, I think. But so I think at the very least, it would be a longer timeline.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. Him getting granted a divorce, like, I think it keeps him, like, if he gets granted a divorce and then Anne Boleyn has a son,
yeah,
I think if you got that, like, you could probably string it out to a point, like, where they were together for a while, because I mean, like, he was capable of being with the same woman for a while. You know, he improved that. It's just like if you get those things, then maybe like you keep the Catholic Church in England for a while, because at that point the Reformation, like in the 1520s, 1530s, the Reformation was still mostly a German thing.
Yeah.
Like
very
heavily centralized to Germany. Like we weren't even you hadn't even really gotten the Calvinists weren't there yet. You know, the radical edge had been beaten down with the Peasants' War and everything, and then, you know, you don't get like another, you know, kind of more progressive version of it for a little, you know, to come out, and this starts really spreading outside of everything, outside of Lutheranism for a few years. So I mean, like, if you keep Henry there, you keep the church in England, like, that changes a lot of things. And if you keep the church in England long enough to where Henry dies, and they haven't, like, the thing is, as long as you keep the land in church hands, like, the longer you do that, the more it puts off everything. And like, if you know, and like, if England doesn't get its hand on all of that property, capitalism is stunted dramatically. It would have taken a good deal longer for it to work, because without early moves towards industrialization through those seized lands, you know, you wouldn't have had the explosion of, you know, the English Empire, Protestantism, you know, finding those coal seams so you can, you know, rule the world with guns and ships. You know, it's you don't have it. So like I think that's your like demarcation line. Like if Henry VIII dies and that land has not been seized, like, you know, who knows, you know.
That's a really good point.
That delays it for like 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even longer, because like in hindsight, we could tell that the thing that capitalism needed to rule the world and take it over was it needed to like piggyback onto something and like start taking over the dying parts of this old manorial system that, you know, and the old manorial ways that they did everything, not just farming and land tenure and feudal levies, but like, you know, their money and banking systems and everything like that. And it needed a big flourishing empire that had, you know, this huge reach to do that. And as we saw with the Dutch, they were tiny. They couldn't do it. Their thing wasn't big enough. Their structure wasn't big enough. So if their structure isn't big enough and it moves, the center of new burgeoning capitalism moves to England, and it still and the church still has the land, like even if it moves to England because the bankers there, you know, they start figuring things out early or whatever, like England isn't the same empire without that church land.
Yeah.
It's the only one that got church land that early and in such a windfall, and was able to just be like, sell it off and be like, yes, fill up the coffers, you know. That they got to do it, and that's the thing, to me anyway.
Yeah. Like it's an interesting thought experiment, and I do enjoy playing with this one. I think you're right. Like say it gets returned, like the divorce gets granted, which is entirely within the realm of possibility. If but that is like. There's so many moving parts in play because like Catherine is like, hey, fuck you. And that's like one of the biggest issues. It's like there are legal problems. If it was granted though, and he has the son, I think that things might just turn out a little bit different. And he could just be like a reform advocate, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a loose reform advocate, like one of the princes of the empire, who were like, yeah, I'm going to do this to get some better leverage against the emperor or the church or whoever. Yeah. And you just get the same thing. I mean, I think back when we did the What If series, and we talked about if Henry VIII's older brother Arthur hadn't died.
Wrong son died.
Wrong son died. If he hadn't died, like how, like, I think that's the big thing. Like, I think that's kind of like the big tipping point, because like,
I genuinely don't think we would be speaking English right now.
Yeah, agreed. While Clement does, we'd probably speaking some Germanic language.
Yeah.
Oh wait, English is Germanic.
No!
Never mind. Fuck no. Yeah. Like Eleanor is right. Like there is precedent for Clement doing this, but like the Holy Roman Empire was not, like, they would have had to have been significantly appeased, like in ways that it probably would have been very difficult for the papacy to do and still maintain itself in a real way. Like it's such a far-fetched thing that Clement granting the divorce seems more like out there to me than even like Henry going Lutheran, because he wrote to Martin Luther. He's like, will your church grant me a divorce? And Martin Luther was like, no, divorce is the worst. He really did.
Yeah.
He hated divorce.
Yeah, he did hate divorce. Yeah.
It's like, if somebody would have, he searched around, Henry VIII searched around for other options, like going their own way, like the middle way or the third way or whatever the fuck it is. Like that was the 10th option. And,
no one saw this shit coming.
Very little church land had been successfully seized and like held for long. Like as we said earlier, the Avignon papacy land was still like a little fiefdom covered up by France that was still like more beholden to the church, and the French crown was kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever. That was still a thing, and it's just like. And Henry's like, okay, cool, I'm leaving. Also, we're seizing all the church. Also, we're seizing the church land at the same time. And by the time like he got that and sold it off, like that's the thing. Once that happens, once that happens, it's like the world we live in now is not completely set, obviously, because there are a whole lot of things that could have gone differently. But like once that happens, like. The earliest form of capitalism is it grows into like a now viable thing, because it can piggyback on mercantilism and the age of exploration and colonialism, and once it has that, the game set match. I mean, I think the reason that we get so many counterfactuals about this, and the reason that we like to do them, is because this is the time when you like can see like capitalism, or in some cases Protestantism being delayed like significantly and taking like incredibly different shapes, and like it is really insane that like him choosing to start his own church and get a divorce instead of staying Catholic, instead of becoming a Lutheran, instead of, becoming some weird Hussite thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, instead of any of that, he's just like, start my own thing, seized all the land. There we go. And you're just like, huh. Even the Hussites didn't seize all the land. Like, it's like, that's a new thing. Like, that is
it's top down, right?
Yes.
Like this.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, it's very much a royal response. And it's like, so with the Hussites, you have very much a kind of like bottom up one. And like, granted, it's led by academics, but it becomes a very, and there's lots of ways to be a Hussite, right? Taborites are not like the Prague Hussites. But you have kind of like that. Whereas with the Lutherans, it's kind of like this middle of the road. It's very bourgeois. It's very like, it's like, this one's for the burghers. Don't worry. Like, we're not going to trouble any princes. Nothing like that is going to happen. And then with the Church of England, it's just top down. The king gets everything. There you go. Yeah. Right. And, part of why that's allowed to happen is because England is relatively unimportant. Right? Yeah. Like when the Hussites kick off, the church is like, oh, bitch, we are absolutely not. Like, we're
right down the road. What the fuck are you doing?
We are going to have several unsuccessful crusades about this shit. And we will keep poking this for hundreds of years if we need to. When England does it, everyone's like, huh.
Can they do that? And it's like, and I mean, like, the only real attempt from outside to change this is the Spanish Armada, which was a boondoggle and was sunk. Like, it just got decimated.
Exactly. So it's like, all of this is kind of like neither here nor there. But yeah, I do think that if Henry VIII got what he fucking wanted, he would have calmed down. Yeah. I just think he's a little baby man, garbage man.
Yeah, and it being like top down, like, even if they're like, if Henry hadn't been able to seize it all and had to use like lords, and whoever as like proxies for this somehow, like, that would have delayed capitalism too, because it being top down and them just being able to give it away to whoever was the highest bidder, and those people being like, well, we got to make some money off of this in order to recoup what I just paid for it. That's the cycle. That starts that is the germ of, capitalist thought that has been floating around in humanity for a long time, because there have always been commercialists. There have always been people doing that, but capitalism wasn't a thing. And that germ finally takes root, and now it becomes a plant, Now it's Yep. Yeah, Benjamin, thank you so much for the question, and we hope you enjoyed the show today. We got we got through these questions. Patrons, thank you so much. Please keep submitting them. It doesn't matter how weird they are, or counterfactuals or whatever like that. Just you can just be like top 5 favorite wars, and we'll put something together. But thank y'all, and thank you everyone for listening. Eleanor, what's going on with you?
You can check out my blog at going-medieval.com, where I do be writing. You can get your hands on a copy of the paperback for The Once and Future Sex. As I mentioned briefly in the show, I've got a little list of medieval books that I like. That I've tweeted it, so I don't know. Like, go find me on the socials at Going Medieval, where there's 5 books I think you should read. Nice. And I think that those are all good things that I can do and that you could check out.
Yeah, you can find me on the socials. Luke is Amazing. You can find People's History of the Old Republic wherever you listen to this show, if you want to hear me gab about Star Wars. But thank you again so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.